Well, thank you for that warm reception. It's great to be back here. It's tough to follow Dennis and Sandy, though. They've covered so many things. But I just want to share a few things with this opening, because you're stuck listening to me tomorrow, assuming you show up for the session. So I'll be relatively brief. But if you stop and look at it, we have come a long way. And we should be proud of being the comeback state in this country. But it's not a straight line. Many of us have had very fruitful, wonderful lives. Does anyone here remember a life where everything just happened to the good? Now, if I ask you, did you face some major crises, challenges in your life, I bet everyone's hand would go up. The question is, what do you do about it when that happens? Because usually what you find is what people are made of is not when times are good, but when times aren't good. How do you respond? And what value system were you raised with? Do you hide? Do you walk away? Or do you make a commitment to solve it? I'm a Michigander, and I'm a proud one. And I know the value system we are all raised with is we solve it. And that's what this conference is really about in a lot of ways, this time. We've suffered a major setback. Flint was a terrible tragedy. The people are still suffering there. But we're focusing on solutions. I appreciate the mayor being here. We're partnering together to put plans in place to bring that city back, to address the water issues, but make Flint a stronger place than it was before with respect to education, with respect to health care, with respect to jobs. That's the spirit of Michigan. We've got a challenge in Detroit education. Does that surprise anyone? That's been a challenge for how many years? How many decades? But the point is, we're doing something about it. Just think back a few years as Sandy asked you to think back. We're still going through issues of talking about what the solution's going to be. But is anyone arguing about the fact there's going to be a huge repayment of the school system's debt? Or people have already talked about how fast the elected school board could come back? In prior years, either one of those topics would have consumed this entire conference. People are just assuming those things are getting done now. That's the spirit of solving problems. Is everyone going to get what they want out of the solution? Probably not. But can't we make huge progress? And then, again, go back to our values. And I still believe in relentless positive action. You don't back down. You recognize you had mistakes happen, bad things happened, but you get up and do something about it. And that's what I'm counting on this conference for in many respects. Because it was interesting, when I started talking to some of the media today, had some positive ones, but in fact, I'll tell you, I listened to their questions, how they approach things, their tone of voice. It was like talking to Eeyore. If you look at how we're going to be perceived ourselves when we look in the mirror, or how the rest of the world is going to look at us, we have to stand up for ourselves. We have to believe in ourselves, to understand we're not perfect. Mistakes happen, errors happen. God knows you wish they never did. But you move forward. You try to correct those, and hopefully you end up better and stronger. That's the spirit we need at this conference. Do not let people get you down. Do not drag yourself down. Think back to 2011. We were in the hole for the entire United States. We were 50 out of 50. What would have happened if we would have had the attitude that you see in many people today back then? We'd still be 50 out of 50 instead of being near the top. It's because we recognized we had to reinvent ourselves. We had to bring some fire and passion back into our spirits. We had to recognize we needed to be one great Michigan. And so we're seeing now a fraying of some of that. We accomplished a lot, but as you get success, sometimes you sort of Back off a little bit and say, okay, now we can go back to arguing about things. We can argue about things on Detroit Public Schools, not recognizing we're showing huge progress. We can argue about a regional transit authority that I'm proud to say took us 20-some years, 30, 40, 50 years to get set up. Let's be proud it's there and let's get going. Let's recognize the positives. Let's recognize we still have serious issues and be leaders and say the dialogue is about how we recognize we can solve it together. Michigan can be the role model for the country to say we don't have to follow the broken political model the rest of our country has. I've told you this before. The way I view my role is I'm with my family. You're my family, a family of 10 million people. And I pretend I'm sitting at that kitchen table talking about important issues. But hopefully you can see it. You may not like everything I say, but how I talk to people, I try to talk to them like they're a family member. Isn't that how we should operate? That's how we operate when we go to work, with respect towards others. And then we have this political world where it's fair game to do any kind of stuff you want to say. That's not right. There shouldn't be separate standards. It should be the same standard. It should be the family standard. And that's what I'm going to keep doing. The reports of my demise are well overblown. So the people I met this morning, the media people that were trying to get me depressed, I think, as I can tell you, all it did was get me more fired up. And I hope I'm getting you fired up. Because as you look at this conference, I'm going to walk through one pillar after another. And I can tell you, this should be about solutions. This should not be about dwelling on problems for the next 2 or 3 days. You're here to solve problems and you want to get solutions. Now let's talk about them. Entrepreneurship, huge opportunity for us. But look at how far we've come in the last few years. Economic gardening is working in Michigan. We've created an environment where we've created thousands and thousands of new enterprises, small businesses. It's working. But we can do even better. Look at the Madison building, for example, in Detroit. Did you ever visualize in downtown Detroit you'd have whole buildings full of startup companies? That's awesome. The question is, how do we take the Madison building and make it the Madison district? And we have people making those investments. So let's talk about how to grow it across Detroit, but every corner of Michigan. That's one of the wonderful things with broadband. We can do small business enterprises doing business around the world in Ironwood. Every corner of Michigan can do it. And that's the dialogue we should have. Education, I agree with Dennis. It's not just urban education, it's education. And we don't rank well. But we've been doing a lot of good things in the background. Let's put those things together in a cohesive vision that people can grab hold of and use the building blocks we've started. Let's not throw out the building blocks we've already put in place. We have been leading the nation in our investment in preschool over the last few years. How many people knew that? We're making it so people that couldn't go, those young kids that couldn't afford to go, can now go. We're working on pre-3 reading to understand we need to do a better job to help those kids read. We're doing things like the Detroit Promise, opportunities to get young people into college. We're doing career tech education to bring back the skilled trades. There are awesome tens of thousands of great jobs out there we can fill. Let's have that discussion. And then you talk about investing in the future. We're going to do that in all these areas, infrastructure, but various enterprises. Look at the auto industry. We're at a roll in the auto industry. It is at an all-time high. And why it's at an all-time high, we're actually talking about how it's going to transform to mobility. During the lost decade, we weren't bright enough to figure out that question, and we paid a price for it. We learned a lesson from the lost decade, so let's be smarter and brighter than we were last time and say in 5 to 10, 15 years, it's going to be the mobility industry. So what are we doing in Michigan? We're leading the world in mobility. But we can't take it for granted. So that's what we should be talking about in this conference. These are the opportunities we have in front of us. So let's not dwell on the past. Let's not dwell on what didn't go right. Let's learn from it. Let's understand we still need to help people. Dennis was exactly right. We need rising tide to happen in urban areas in our state and rural areas in our state. Not everyone's participating in this comeback. But I'm committed to finding every one of those spots and saying, how can we help bring those tools to make that happen? That's solution-oriented. So my ask of you is to stand up and be a loud, proud Michigander to say, we don't have to follow the whole national model of people just yelling, fighting, and blaming one another. We can tell people that we're a family in this state. We solve problems together in this state. We bring solutions to bear that make a difference in real people's lives, that will transform Michigan for the next 5 years, the next 15 years, the next 50 years, and we're going to speak up and show that leadership. So have a great conference. I'll be back tomorrow, but let's speak up and not be the depressing people. Let's be the proud people that Michiganders we are. Thank you.